The massive ship appeared on a quiet Tuesday morning. It came without warning, pushing aside clouds as it descended through Earth's atmosphere. The vessel was larger than any human-made structure, its surface gleaming like polished silver under the sun. Air traffic controllers worldwide scrambled to respond, and military bases went on high alert. But the ship simply hung there, floating silently above New York City. People stopped their cars in the middle of streets to look up. Children pressed their faces against classroom windows. News helicopters circled at a safe distance, broadcasting the scene to billions of viewers around the world. Everyone waited for something to happen, holding their breath in fear and wonder. After 3 hours of silence, the ship sent its first message. It wasn't directed at any government or military leader. Instead, the message appeared on every screen on Earth: phones, computers, televisions, and even digital billboards. The words were simple: "We come to test your worth." The United Nations called an emergency meeting within the hour. Representatives from every country rushed to the headquarters, their usual political differences forgotten in the face of this unprecedented event. They had barely settled into their seats when it happened. A beam of light appeared in the center of the General Assembly Hall. As the light faded, a tall figure stepped forward. The alien looked almost human, but not quite. Its skin had a slight blue tint, and its eyes were too large, too bright. It wore something that looked like a flowing robe made of shifting colors. "I am Val," the alien said, its voice clear and perfect in every human language simultaneously. "I represent the Galactic Observation Council. We have watched your species for 300 years. The room stayed quiet. Val's presence commanded attention without effort. "Your civilization stands at a crossroads," it continued. "You have advanced quickly, but without direction. You have power, but lack unity. The Council must decide if you are ready to join the galactic community, or if you require guidance." Ambassador James Brown, an older man known for his calm approach to crisis situations, stood up. "We welcome peaceful contact with your civilization," he said carefully. "But your words suggest this isn't just a friendly visit." Val's mouth curved into what might have been a smile. "Correct. We have found that civilizations at your stage of development often require integration into our empire for their own good. However, our laws require that we offer you a chance to prove yourselves." Murmurs filled the room. Everyone understood the threat behind Val's polite words. Integration meant submission, and for their own good was the oldest excuse for conquest in human history. "And how exactly do you suggest we prove ourselves?" Brown asked, keeping his voice steady. "A series of challenges," Val replied. 5 tests to measure your species' potential. We have done this 10,000 times with other civilizations. None have succeeded in beating us." The alien's eyes swept across the room. "If you win, you earn the right to develop independently and join us as equals. If you lose, we will guide your development as we see fit." The room erupted in voices. Some representatives demanded immediate military action. Others called for acceptance of the challenges. A few suggested trying to negotiate different terms. Val waited patiently for the noise to die down. "You have no real choice," it said simply. "Your most powerful weapons would not scratch the paint on our smallest ship. We offer these challenges out of tradition and respect for law, not necessity." Brown looked around the room, seeing the fear and anger on his colleagues' faces, but he also saw determination. Humanity had faced countless challenges in its history. They had survived ice ages, plagues, and their own destructive tendencies. They had climbed out of caves, reached for the stars, and never stopped pushing forward. "We accept your challenges," Brown said firmly, "but we have conditions. First, we choose our own champions for each test. Second, the challenges must be fair, no changing rules in the middle. Third, we want everything recorded and broadcast to our people. They deserve to see this." Val's expression didn't change, but something like amusement flickered in those 2 bright eyes. "Agreed. Though I warn you, choosing champions is harder than you think. These challenges will test more than simple physical or mental capabilities. They will measure the very essence of what you are as a species. When do we begin? Brown asked. You have 3 days to choose your first champion, Val answered. The challenges will test intelligence, creativity, emotional capacity, and adaptability. Your champion must be selected before you know the specific test. Choose wisely. With those words, Val disappeared in another flash of light. The room remained quiet for several long moments. Then Brown turned to address his fellow representatives. We need to broadcast this worldwide immediately. Every human on Earth needs to understand what's at stake. As the news spread across the globe, reactions varied wildly. Some people panicked, clearing store shelves and hiding in their homes. Others celebrated in the streets, excited about proof of alien life despite the circumstances. Most people fell somewhere in between, worried but determined to face whatever came next. Governments worldwide began the process of identifying potential champions. They looked at test scores, athletic records, and special achievements. Lists of professors, chess champions, and military strategists were compiled. But something about Val's warning about choosing champions bothered many people. Meanwhile, the alien ship remained visible above New York, a constant reminder of what humanity faced. Smaller vessels occasionally emerged from the massive ship, darting around Earth's atmosphere. They seemed to be collecting data, scanning cities and natural landmarks alike. Scientists worked around the clock to analyze every bit of information they could gather about the aliens. The ship's technology was far beyond human understanding, but they kept trying. Military leaders developed contingency plans, even though they knew their weapons would be useless. The world held its breath, waiting for the first challenge. People everywhere discussed what the tests might involve. Would they be physical contests, mathematical problems, tests of technology? The uncertainty added to the tension. Through it all, Ambassador Brown couldn't shake the feeling that they were already being tested. The way Val had spoken about choosing champions, the 3-day waiting period, it all felt like part of a larger assessment. He shared his thoughts with the selection committee. What if we're thinking about this all wrong? He suggested during a late-night meeting. Val specifically said these challenges would test what we are as a species. Maybe we shouldn't be looking at just individual achievements. The committee members looked at him with tired eyes. They had been working nonstop since Val's appearance, reviewing thousands of potential candidates. Look at how Val presented everything, Brown continued. They could have simply conquered us. Instead, they're testing us. They care about process, about law. They're measuring something specific about humanity, and I don't think it's just our ability to solve problems. As the 3rd day approached, tension around the world reached new heights. The selection committee had narrowed down their list of potential champions, but doubt lingered over their choices. Were they looking for the right qualities? Would their selection affect humanity's chance of success? The future of human independence hung in the balance, and the first challenge hadn't even begun. Above New York, Val's ship continued its silent watch, waiting to see how humanity would respond to the greatest test it had ever faced. The selection committee sat in stunned silence as they watched Tom walk through the door. The tall, thin man with round glasses and slightly messy brown hair didn't look impressive. His old sweater had patches on the elbows, and he carried a worn leather bag full of books. He worked as a librarian in a small Kansas town and had never won any major awards or competitions. But Tom had written a letter that caught their attention. He didn't list achievements or degrees. Instead, he wrote about how he spent his lunch breaks playing chess with both the local chess champion and the 8-year-old girl who was just learning the game. He wrote about finding patterns in the way people searched for books, in the way stories were connected across cultures, in the way knowledge itself flowed from person to person. Val appeared in the room right on schedule. The alien's expression changed slightly when it saw Tom, perhaps surprise, perhaps amusement. This is your champion for the first challenge. Ambassador Brown nodded firmly. Yes, this is Tom. Very well. Val waved a hand, and the room transformed. The walls became transparent, showing that they were now in a massive arena. Millions of holographic spectators watched from all angles, aliens of various species and humans watching through screens worldwide. In the center stood 2 chairs and what looked like a 3-dimensional chessboard, but it had multiple shifting levels that moved through space. The first challenge tests intelligence through strategic thinking, Val announced. This game combines elements from various galactic cultures. Each piece moves in 4 dimensions. The goal is to capture your opponent's central consciousness while defending your own. Tom studied the board with curious eyes. He didn't look worried or intimidated. He just looked interested, the same way he looked when discovering a new book series. May I ask questions about the rules? For the next 20 minutes, Tom asked about how pieces moved, how they interacted, and how victory was achieved. His questions weren't just about rules. He asked about why certain moves were considered illegal, about the history of the game, about how different species approached it. Val answered each question precisely, but with growing puzzlement. The game began. Val moved first, its pieces dancing through the levels with practiced skill. Tom took his time with each move, sometimes staring at the board for several minutes before making a simple, seemingly insignificant move. Val played with mathematical precision, each move calculated for maximum efficiency. 3 hours into the game, something changed. Tom's scattered pieces suddenly revealed a pattern. His apparently random moves had created a complex web that now limited Val's options. The alien paused for the first time, its large eyes studying the board intensely. Interesting, Val said. You play without logic. Not without logic, Tom replied quietly. Just with a different kind of logic. In my library, I've noticed that sometimes the most important part of a story isn't in the words. It's in the spaces between the words. The game continued. Val's moves became more aggressive, trying to break through Tom's unusual strategy. But Tom had created patterns within patterns, each move revealing new connections that hadn't been visible before. It was like a conversation through movement, a dance of possibilities. Finally, after 7 hours, Tom moved his last piece. It wasn't a dramatic move, just a small shift that completed a pattern. Val stared at the board for 3 full minutes before speaking. You have achieved victory, the alien announced, its voice carrying a mix of confusion and respect. Never have I seen this game played in such a manner. The human spectators erupted in cheers while the alien audiences buzzed with discussion. But Val wasn't finished. With another wave of its hand, the game board disappeared, and a new figure appeared in the room. The second challenge begins now, Val declared. A test of pure intelligence. Dr. Anna stepped forward. Like Tom, she wasn't what most people expected. She taught physics at a small community college, choosing to work with beginning students rather than pursuing research at a prestigious university. She wore practical clothes and carried a tablet full of student papers she had been grading. Your scientific understanding is primitive, Val stated. Yet you claim to be ready for galactic civilization. Solve this. A hologram appeared, showing a complex quantum equation that filled the air with shifting symbols. Our greatest minds have worked on this problem for centuries, Val continued. It represents a fundamental barrier in our understanding of reality. If you can solve it, or even advance our understanding, you will win this challenge. Anna studied the equation carefully. She pulled out her tablet and started taking notes, occasionally muttering to herself. Hours passed as she worked, while Val watched with what seemed like satisfaction, clearly expecting failure. But then Anna started asking questions, simple questions at first, about basic assumptions in the equation. Her questions became more focused, more specific. She asked about how Val's civilization approached quantum mechanics, about their mathematical models. You're thinking about this as a complex problem, she said finally. But sometimes the answer is simple. Look. She pulled up 2 images on her tablet. This is how my students often draw atomic structures when they first learn about them. It's wrong, but it contains a kind of truth. And this is how we draw them in advanced textbooks. More accurate, but maybe missing something fundamental. She began to explain her theory, using simple diagrams and basic analogies. She talked about how teaching beginners had forced her to break down complex ideas into simple parts, and how sometimes that process revealed new ways of seeing old problems. Val's expression changed as it followed her explanation. The alien's eyes widened slightly, its color shifting to a deeper blue. This approaches the problem from an entirely unexpected direction. Sometimes, Anna said softly, we miss solutions because we think they must be as complicated as the problem. My students taught me that simple questions can lead to profound answers. The holographic audience watched in amazement as Anna walked Val through her solution. She hadn't just solved the problem. She had found a way to explain it that opened new avenues of research, new ways of thinking about quantum mechanics itself. The second challenge is complete, Val announced finally. Humanity has succeeded in ways we did not anticipate. The alien turned to address the watching crowds. 2 challenges have been met. 3 remain. As the arena faded and they returned to the normal room, Val looked at Ambassador Brown. Your choices continue to surprise us. These were not your greatest scientific minds or your most celebrated strategists. No, Brown agreed. They were exactly who we needed them to be. He watched as Tom returned to reading a book he brought along, while Anna went back to grading papers. Neither seemed particularly impressed by their own achievements. The next challenge will test different qualities, Val warned. Choose carefully. As Val disappeared, Brown smiled slightly. They had won the first 2 challenges not through superior knowledge or skill, but through uniquely human ways of thinking. The next challenges would be different, but humanity was starting to understand what they needed to do to win. The world celebrated their victories, but the hardest tests were still to come. 3 more challenges remained, and Val's expression suggested they would only get more difficult. But for the first time since the alien ship appeared, people dared to hope that humanity might actually succeed. The morning air was crisp as Mary sat on her usual bench in Central Park, pulling out her box of chalk. She had been drawing on the same stretch of sidewalk for 15 years, making pictures that washed away in the rain only to be replaced by new ones the next day. Today might be her last chance to draw. The selection committee had found her here last week. They watched her work for hours, saw how children stopped to ask her questions, how tired businessmen smiled at her pictures, how tourists from around the world took photos of her art. They saw how she made people feel, even if they couldn't explain why. Val appeared beside her bench in a flash of light. This is your champion for the artistic challenge. The alien looked down at Mary's weathered hands and simple clothes with obvious doubt. I am, Mary said, not looking up as she arranged her chalk pieces by color. Would you like to draw with me? Val seemed taken aback by the offer. The challenge is to create the most perfect work of art. We will each have 6 hours. Our works will be judged by both human and alien audiences. Mary nodded, finally looking up at Val with kind eyes. That sounds nice, but art isn't really about judging, you know. It's about sharing something from inside yourself. The alien waved its hand, and 2 large blank walls appeared in the park. Around them, holographic viewers flickered into existence, millions of watchers from Earth and across the galaxy. Val moved to one wall, touching it with long fingers. The surface shimmered, becoming whatever material the alien needed. Mary stayed on her piece of sidewalk. Mind if I work here instead? The light's better, and I know how it feels. Val paused, then nodded. The surface is irrelevant. You may work where you choose. They began. Val's hands moved with incredible speed and precision, creating images that seemed to move and change as they watched. Colors that humans had never seen before danced across the wall, forming patterns that followed perfect mathematical formulas. It was beautiful in a way that hurt the eyes to look at, like staring at the sun. Mary started with a simple circle of blue chalk. She worked slowly, adding colors bit by bit, sometimes stopping to talk with the children who gathered to watch. She told them stories as she drew, about the old man who fed pigeons on her bench every Thursday, about the young couple who got engaged under the big oak tree last spring, about the lost dog she helped find its way home. Hours passed. Val's wall became a masterpiece of technical perfection. Every line was exactly where it needed to be, every color precisely calculated for maximum visual impact. The alien audiences murmured in appreciation of its flawless execution. Mary's sidewalk piece grew slowly. It showed the park, but not just as it was. She drew it as it lived in her memory and in her heart, the way it looked in all 4 seasons at once, the way it felt early in the morning and late at night, the way it held thousands of small stories in every corner. "Why do you include the imperfections?" Val asked, pausing in its work to study Mary's drawing. The cracks in the sidewalk, the uneven colors, the smudges where children have walked through your work. Mary smiled, adding another touch of green to a tree. "Because that's where the life is. Perfect things don't grow or change. They just are. But imperfect things have room to become something new." Val watched as she worked, its own perfect creation forgotten for a moment. "Your technique is primitive. Your tools are simple. Your understanding of color theory and composition is basic at best." "Maybe," Mary agreed cheerfully. "But art isn't about knowing things. It's about feeling things." She pointed to a small detail in her drawing, a tiny figure feeding pigeons. "See that man? His name was Joe. He came here every day for 20 years until he passed away last winter. The pigeons still gather at the same time, waiting for him. That's part of the park's story now, so it's part of my drawing." The alien audience had grown quiet, many of them moving closer to study Mary's work. They saw something in it they had never seen before. Mistakes and memories and feelings, all mixed together in a way that made perfect sense, even though it followed no rules they understood. One small alien child, watching through the hologram, reached out as if trying to touch the chalk colors. Its parent noticed and did the same. Soon, dozens of alien viewers were reaching out, trying to connect with this strange, messy, beautiful human art. Val looked at its own wall, perfectly executed, technically flawless, and somehow empty. Then it looked back at Mary's drawing, full of flaws and life and stories that pulled at something deep inside even its alien mind. "I do not understand," Val admitted. "Your work violates every principle of artistic excellence we have developed over millennia. Yet it causes feelings I cannot explain." Mary patted the sidewalk beside her. "Come sit. Help me finish this part. Sometimes you understand better when you stop trying to understand." To everyone's surprise, Val sat down on the sidewalk. Mary handed the alien a piece of blue chalk. Together, they added the last details to the drawing. Val's perfect lines softening as they mixed with Mary's imperfect ones, creating something entirely new. When the 6 hours were up, no one needed to judge the competition. Val's perfect wall stood forgotten while humans and aliens alike gathered around Mary's sidewalk drawing, sharing stories about what they saw in it, what it made them feel. "The third challenge is complete," Val announced, still holding the piece of chalk Mary had given it. "Humanity has succeeded in a way we never imagined possible." The alien looked at its blue-stained fingers with wonder. "We have created perfect art for 10,000 years, but we never understood what we were missing." As the holographic audience faded away, Mary started packing up her chalk. "Will you come back tomorrow?" she asked Val. "I can teach you how to draw cats. I always start with the eyes. That's where their stories live." Val looked at her with those 2 large alien eyes, seeing not a champion or a competitor, but a teacher. "I would like that," it said softly, "even if it takes me 10,000 more years to understand." Mary smiled, closing her chalk box. "Understanding isn't always the point. Sometimes it's enough just to try, to make mistakes, to create something that isn't perfect, but is real." As Val disappeared, the world celebrated humanity's third victory. But something had changed. This win felt different from the first two. They hadn't just proven they could compete with an advanced civilization. They had shown them something new, something that all their advanced technology and perfect knowledge had never taught them. Two more challenges remained, but now even the aliens watched with new eyes, wondering what else these imperfect, emotional, beautiful humans might show them about the universe they thought they understood so well. Jack stood in his empty kindergarten classroom, straightening the small chairs and putting away finger paintings from that day's art session. The evening sun made long shadows through the windows, and he could hear the last few children playing in the schoolyard while waiting for their parents. He wasn't surprised when Val appeared. The alien had been watching him teach for the past 3 days, ever since the selection committee chose him for the fourth challenge. What had surprised everyone was that Jack hadn't changed his routine at all. He kept teaching his class, handling small crises, and helping tiny humans learn how to be people. "Your species continues to make unusual choices," Val said, looking around at the colorful classroom walls covered in children's artwork. "This challenge will test emotional intelligence and crisis management. Yet you choose one who works with undeveloped humans." Jack smiled as he picked up a stuffed bear someone had left behind. Children aren't undeveloped humans. They're complete people who are learning how to understand themselves and others. There's a difference. Val waved its hand, and suddenly they weren't in the classroom anymore. They stood in a large circular room with screens covering every wall. Each screen showed a different scene of conflict or crisis, some between humans, some between aliens, some between entire civilizations. "The fourth challenge requires resolving these situations," Val explained. "You will face 3 scenarios. Each must be solved within 2 hours. Your solutions will be judged by their effectiveness and lasting impact." The alien audience appeared in their usual holographic form, joined by billions of humans watching from Earth. Jack looked at the screens calmly, the same way he looked at his students when they were having a difficult day. "Can I talk to the people involved?" he asked. Val nodded. "The simulations are fully interactive." "Then let's start with that one." Jack pointed to a screen showing 2 alien species in what looked like a heated argument. The screen expanded, and Jack found himself standing between 2 groups of aliens who looked nothing alike and seemed ready to fight. One species was tall and crystalline, with bodies that chimed when they moved. The other was small and dark, seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. They had been sharing a space station for 50 years, and their conflict had grown worse each year. Instead of asking about the specific problem, Jack sat down on the floor. Both alien groups stared at him in confusion. "In my classroom," he said quietly, "when 2 children are fighting, I found it's usually not about what they say it's about. Mind if I ask you both some questions?" For the next hour, Jack listened. He asked simple questions about their daily lives, their families, their hopes. He learned that the crystal aliens made music with their movements, but the dark aliens experienced sound as pain. He learned that the dark aliens absorbed light for food, but the crystal aliens needed light to communicate. "So you're both trying to survive," he said finally. "And you both think the other side wants to hurt you, but neither of you actually wants that, do you?" Both groups were quiet. Jack stood up, brushing off his pants. "In my class, we have a quiet corner and a noisy corner. Some kids need quiet to feel safe. Others need to move and make noise. We learn to take turns and respect each other's needs. Maybe you could try something similar." The solution wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The 2 species began talking about rotating schedules and creating separated spaces that could meet both their needs. More importantly, they began to understand each other. The second scenario involved a human city facing a natural disaster. Instead of focusing on the immediate crisis, Jack gathered community leaders and helped them create support networks. He showed them how to make scared people feel safe, how to turn panic into purpose. "Like fire drills in school," he explained. "We practice being calm and helping each other. Then when something scary happens, we remember how to be brave together." The third scenario was the hardest. a complicated political conflict between 5 different civilizations. Jack approached it the same way he handled playground disputes. He had each group share their story, but more importantly, he had them listen to each other's stories. Sometimes, he told them, when we're angry or scared, we forget that everyone else is trying their best too. In my classroom, we have a saying, mistakes are chances to learn, and feelings are chances to understand. Val watched all of this with growing fascination. The alien had expected complex negotiations or clever strategic solutions. Instead, Jack used the same simple, caring approach he used with his kindergarten students. Your methods are unexpected, Val said as the final scenario resolved. You treat advanced civilizations like children. No, Jack corrected gently. I treat them like people. Children just help us remember that everyone needs the same basic things: to feel safe, to be heard, to know they matter. We don't outgrow that, we just get better at hiding it. Val was quiet for a moment. In all 3 scenarios, you didn't solve the root problems completely. Because that's not how people work, Jack explained. We don't solve things once and for all. We learn and grow and try again. Every day in my classroom is different, even when we're working on the same problems. That's okay. That's how we get better. The alien audience had been silent throughout the challenge, but now they began to discuss what they had seen. Many of them had expected human emotional intelligence to be primitive, based on instinct rather than logic. Instead, they saw something they hadn't considered: emotion as a form of wisdom, empathy as a practical tool for solving problems. The 4th challenge is complete, Val announced. Humanity has succeeded, though not in any way we anticipated. The alien looked at Jack curiously. You could have taken a more sophisticated approach. You have degrees in psychology and conflict resolution. Why choose such simple methods? Jack smiled. Because simple doesn't mean easy, and complicated doesn't mean better. Every day, my students teach me that the most important things are usually the simplest. Be kind, listen well, help when you can, say sorry when you're wrong. As the simulated room faded, and they returned to Jack's classroom, the sun had set. A stuffed bear still sat where he had left it. Jack picked it up and put it in his desk drawer, saving it for tomorrow, when its owner would come looking for it. One challenge remains, Val said. But you have shown us something we did not expect to learn. Perhaps we have been measuring advancement by the wrong standards. There aren't wrong standards, Jack replied, turning off the classroom lights. Just different ways of growing. Like my students, some learn to read first, others learn to share first. In the end, they all learn what they need to know. As Val disappeared, the world celebrated their 4th victory. But this win felt different again. They hadn't just shown they could solve problems. They had shown that humanity's supposed weaknesses, their emotions and imperfections, could be their greatest strengths. The final challenge still waited. But now, even Val seemed to be wondering what else these surprising humans might teach them. Rita checked her emergency radio one last time as she walked through the refugee camp she helped manage. 10 years of coordinating disaster responses had taught her to always be ready for anything. But nothing had prepared her for being humanity's last champion. The selection committee found her during a flood response operation. They watched as she reorganized supply lines on the fly, calmed panicked families, and somehow made order out of chaos. They saw how she adapted to each new problem without losing focus or hope. Val appeared beside her without warning. The alien looked different now, less certain, more curious. 4 challenges had changed something in the way it viewed humans. The final challenge tests adaptability, Val announced. Your ability to survive and thrive in chaos. Around them, the refugee camp transformed into a blank white room. Are you prepared? Rita shrugged, adjusting her worn jacket. Nobody's ever really prepared. We just do our best with what we have. The white room suddenly exploded with color and motion. The ground shifted under their feet, turning from solid to liquid to gas, and back again. Walls appeared and disappeared. Gravity changed direction randomly. Everything kept changing, following no pattern or rule. Navigate through this space, Val instructed. Reach the exit point. The environment will continue to change. What worked one moment will fail the next. Most species panic when their fundamental understanding of reality breaks down. Rita stumbled as the floor turned to jelly, then caught herself as it became glass. Like a refugee camp in monsoon season, she muttered, or a city after an earthquake. Always moving, always changing. She started walking. When the floor disappeared, she swam through the air. When gravity reversed, she treated the ceiling like a new floor. When walls blocked her path, she found ways around or through them. The alien audience watched in fascination. They had seen other species face this challenge. Most froze in panic or exhausted themselves fighting against each change. But Rita moved like she was dancing with the chaos, accepting each change and using it to move forward. "You are not attempting to predict the changes," Val observed, floating nearby. "Can't predict everything," Rita replied, sliding down what had been a wall but was now a waterfall. "Sometimes you just have to work with what's happening right now." Hours passed. The changes became faster, more extreme. Colors shifted to ones that didn't exist in human vision. Physics stopped making sense entirely. But Rita kept moving, using each change to help her even when she didn't understand it. "How do you maintain direction?" Val asked. "There are no consistent reference points." Rita paused on a platform that had just formed under her feet. "There are always reference points, just not the ones you expect." She pointed to a slight distortion in the chaos. "The exit point creates tiny patterns in the changes, like how birds fly differently when there's a storm coming, or how people act differently when they're scared." Val's eyes widened. No other species had noticed these subtle signs. They were too busy looking for logical patterns that didn't exist. Besides, Rita continued, jumping onto a floating piece of what looked like solid light. "Sometimes you don't need to know where you're going. You just need to keep moving forward and trust that you'll find your way." The challenge grew harder. Now the changes affected time itself. Moments stretched or compressed randomly. Rita adapted to this too, treating time like just another changing condition to work with rather than against. "Your species is so fragile," Val said, watching her navigate a section where space itself folded like paper. "Your bodies break easily. Your lives are short. Yet you seem almost comfortable in chaos." Rita laughed, the sound echoing strangely through the shifting reality. "Maybe we're not fragile. Maybe we're flexible. Like bamboo in a storm, we bend instead of breaking." She was getting closer to the exit point. The chaos reached its peak, reality fragmenting into impossible patterns. But Rita kept moving, using each fragment as a stepping stone, each change as an opportunity. Finally, she reached out and touched the exit point. The chaos room dissolved, leaving them back in the white space where they started. "The final challenge is complete," Val announced. The alien's voice carried a new tone, not just respect, but understanding. "Humanity has succeeded in all 5 challenges, but more importantly, you have taught us something about the nature of advancement itself." The holographic audience erupted in celebration, both aliens and humans cheering together. Rita just sat down, took off her boots, and started checking for blisters. "You know," she said conversationally, "in refugee camps, I've seen people lose everything. Their homes, their possessions, sometimes their families. But humans have this amazing ability to start again, to adapt, to find new ways to live and love and hope." Val nodded slowly. "We thought advancement meant moving beyond chaos into perfect order. We sought to control our environment, to make everything predictable and manageable. But you showed us a different kind of strength, the ability to thrive in uncertainty, to grow through change." The white room faded, bringing them back to the refugee camp. Children were playing soccer with a ball made of tied-up rags. Families were sharing meals cooked over small fires. People who had lost everything were helping others who had lost everything. Humanity will be invited to join the Galactic Council, Val said. Not as students, but as teachers. There are things you understand that we need to learn. Rita smiled, putting her boots back on. We'll probably mess up sometimes, make mistakes, cause some chaos of our own. Good, Val replied, surprising everyone. Perhaps we have had too much order for too long. A little chaos might help us grow. As the alien prepared to leave, Rita stopped it with a gentle hand on its arm. Stay for dinner. The food's simple, but people here always find a way to make it taste like home, no matter where they're from. Val hesitated, then nodded. Together, they walked toward the cooking fires, where people from a dozen different countries were sharing what little they had, adapting recipes from their lost homes to create something new. Above them, the massive alien ship that had once seemed so threatening now looked different. Not a symbol of superior power, but a sign that the universe was bigger and stranger and more wonderful than anyone had imagined. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and proved itself not by being stronger or smarter or more advanced, but by being uniquely human, adaptable, emotional, creative, imperfect, and always growing. Tomorrow, they would begin a new chapter as part of a larger galactic community. But tonight, in a refugee camp somewhere on Earth, an alien learned about the power of sharing a simple meal with people who had learned to make home wherever they were, no matter how many times they had to start over. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all.